A huge benefit is that protein is going to burn significantly more calories through the digestive process than carbohydrates and fat. To really tap into that, make sure that you are prioritizing that high protein diet. The higher protein content of a meal, the larger effect of energy expenditure or calories burned on that meal, so that you can fully optimize taking advantage of the thermic effect of food. Welcome to the Mind and My Wellness podcast, your podcast for all things macros, movement, mindset, and everything in between. Hi there, friends. It's Danny, and welcome back to the Mind and My Wellness podcast. Before we jump into today's episode, which is the third episode and final episode of our How We Burn Calories series to help you more effectively use your calorie expenditure to your advantage to lose weight, to build muscle, or focus on body recomposition, I just wanted to give a special shout out to all of the women absolutely crushing it in my summer reset challenge right now. You ladies are giving me so much inspiration, and I absolutely love seeing all of your wins day in and day out, and just seeing how much you guys are learning. I love this program. It's one of 2 times in the year that I offer a group program, and just to see the community and camaraderie inside this program is truly inspiring. So huge shout out to each and every one of you that is absolutely crushing it now before summer. So can't wait to see what we still have in store. We're only halfway done. So amazing job, and kudos to you guys for really dedicating this time for you. All right. So in today's episode, we are diving in, like I said, to the third and final category of our How We Burn Calories series. Again, my intention for this series is really to help you understand and learn and apply the knowledge that you're learning in these episodes to take advantage to those, whether your goal is to reduce body fat, to build muscle, or just to increase your energy and overall just well-being. So there are those 3 different types of ways and categories in which we burn calories. 2 weeks ago, we covered your BMR, which is going to be the biggest category in terms of burning the most calories per day. Then last week, we covered the thermic effect of activity, and this is the most variable category in terms of what we have control over. So we dove into both of those over the last 2 weeks. If you haven't given those a listen, I highly recommend popping on back and diving into those. And today, we are talking about that third category, which is the thermic effect of food. In today's episode, I'm going to cover what the heck the thermic effect of food even is, how much of an impact the thermic effect of food has on the amount of calories that you burn per day, and how you can impact your TEF or thermic effect of food through the food choices that you make and the eating habits that you have. So, what is the thermic effect of food? The thermic effect of food is a metabolic response to food and refers to the increase in the metabolic rate that occurs after you consume a meal. So essentially, the thermic effect of food is the amount of calories that is required to break down the food, to synthesize the enzymes, and perform metabolic processes throughout the digestive process. So as you're consuming food, that expends energy. So how much does this actually play into account when it comes to the amount of calories that we're burning per day? So the thermic effect of food can account for up to 10% of the calories that you burn per day, which is the least amount of calories out of each of the categories. However, 10% is still a decent amount, and we have some control over that too. So if you really want to take advantage of the thermic effect of food and optimizing your metabolic rate and the amount of calories that you can burn per day, then you're definitely going to want to tune into this episode, because we'll be diving into those ways right here that you can increase the thermic effect of food through the food choices that you're making and the tips that I have. So again, to kind of recap all of this, the thermic effect of food is the process that takes place after a meal through digestion, and it is required, or energy is required, to break down that food, synthesize the enzymes, and perform those metabolic processes. So how can we actually increase our thermic effect of food? There are 3 main ways. Number 1 is going to be to focus on a primarily whole food diet. So with whole foods, a whole food meal, there are studies that have shown that the thermic effect of whole food meals has almost double the effect in terms of caloric burn than that of a processed food meal. That's right. Participants in these studies burned 50% more calories after eating whole foods versus processed foods. Now, a lot of this has to do with the fact that it takes our body more energy to break down those whole foods than a lot of processed foods. Whole foods are also more nutrient dense, which is going to require more energy to break down those nutrients and then to use those nutrients. And processed foods are a very wide category of foods. I mean, even, pre-cut up vegetables are technically considered processed. However, when we're talking about processed foods here, we're talking about those more packaged foods. There's lots of ingredients in them, lots of ingredients that maybe you can't even pronounce. Not necessarily that you shouldn't be eating them, but they're going to have a lower thermic effect than those whole foods because more often than not, they are less nutrient dense. So if you are prioritizing an 80-20 perspective with your diet, meaning 80% of your food is coming from whole foods, 20% is maybe more of those processed foods. If you're, there's something you absolutely love, don't necessarily restrict. However, having that balance with primarily focused on whole foods is really going to help to increase that thermic effect and burn more calories over the long haul based off the foods that you're eating. So again, primarily whole food based is going to increase your thermic effect by what studies show as almost double or at double the amount of those that eat processed foods. Next is eating a high protein diet. It is true that protein actually burns more calories through the digestive process than carbohydrates and fat. So the reported TEF for protein is 20 to 30% of energy content compared to fat, which is 0 to 3%. And carbohydrates, which are 5 to 10%. So in the hierarchy here, protein is going to have the most caloric burn in your diet, followed by carbohydrates, followed by fat. Now we need all of those macronutrients, but it's important, and this is why I absolutely love macros, because we are able to build your macro ratio and profile to really support whatever goal that is that you have. But this is also why a high protein diet is so beneficial. Yes, it can increase muscle mass. It helps to develop muscle. Yes, it helps with hormone regulation. It helps with satiety. I mean, I can go on and on and on about the importance and benefits of eating protein. But for this episode in particular, a huge benefit is that protein is going to burn significantly more calories through the digestive process than carbohydrates and fat to really tap into that and make sure that you are prioritizing that high protein diet so that you can fully optimize taking advantage of the thermic effect of food. So again, the higher protein content of a meal, the larger effect of energy expenditure or calories burned on that meal. And then lastly, evidence also suggests that the thermic effect of food is increased by larger meal sizes as opposed to more frequent smaller meal sizes. Meaning if you're eating, 3 larger meals per day and they're well balanced, they're primarily whole foods, you're focusing on, high protein, you have the right amount of carbs and fat on your plate, that's really where you're going to optimize the thermic effect of food when it comes to calories burned versus eating more frequent, smaller meals throughout the day. Now, again, don't get too hung up on this. I'm just sharing this information in case it's helpful for you and how to think about, prioritizing what macronutrients and really prioritizing whole foods. But at the end of the day, if what works for you is eating those more frequent small meals, don't get too hung up on this. Remember, this makes up about 10% of your daily caloric burn of the energy expenditure you have per day. But it is really interesting that you can dive into this evidence through studies that prove how you can influence that thermic effect. Now, one note that I want to make here and little caveat that I want to make to all of these studies is that the effects of habitual dieting or just long-term dieting, yo-yo dieting, those sorts of habitual diets, as well as meal timing, so when you're eating those meals and other factors still need more research. So we don't really know how those yet apply to the thermic effect of food, but there is more research needing to be done to really dive into those. So if you have any questions on like, well, great, so larger meals, but what about like the timing of those meals? There's just not enough research to really determine how it can impact the thermic effect of food. Same with habitual dieting. So making sure that you are taking into account this information that you're learning, using it to your advantage in a way that feels sustainable for you. Again, my ultimate MO is always going to be sustainability because it's long-term consistency where you are going to see that impact and those long-term changes. So making sure that you are building a sustainable diet and a sustainable lifestyle that is going to support those goals that you have. All right. So in this episode, this short little bite-sized episode on the third category of how we burn calories and how to effectively tap into that information to use it to your advantage, we talked about the thermic effect of food. The thermic effect of food is a metabolic response after we eat that requires energy to break down our foods and process them, which in turn burns calories. This can make up about 10% of the calories that we burn per day. And yes, we can influence our thermic effect of food by eating a primarily whole food diet, by eating a high protein focused diet, and eating fewer larger meals versus more frequent smaller meals in a day. All right. I hope you found this series helpful. I would love to know what you got out of this series and how you're implementing this and these lessons that you've learned over the last 3 episodes into the changes that you're making with maybe your food choices or your lifestyle choices. I always love to hear how these episodes impact you. So please send me a DM over on Instagram at mindedmymacros and also share these episodes with someone who might benefit. It always helps when we share the wealth and share the knowledge. So thank you guys so much for tuning into this series. I hope that you were able to listen to all of them and then apply them to your lifestyle. And I will be back next week with another episode for you. Until then, keep minding your wellness. Thanks for tuning into this episode. Make sure to hit that subscribe button to follow along and catch all future episodes to help you look and feel like the best version of you. I'll see you in the next episode.